Hello everyone, welcome back to our book club.
Yes, we are your hosts. I'm Mr. Daryl and this is...
I'm Miss Maka. So Mr. Daryl, what is today our book?
Huge classic in English literature. This is Great Expectations.
By Charles Dickens.
Well, this story focuses on the lifelong journey and the moral development of our protagonist, Pip.
Yeah, and with extreme imagery and colorful characters, the well-received novel's main theme include wealth, poverty, love, rejection, and good versus evil.
Very nice. Those are always classic.
Yes, exactly. But of course, before we start discussing the book itself, let's look at the agenda, and the order goes like this. First, we are introducing new vocabulary. Then, we will talk about the author. After that, we will give you a short summary of the book.
From there, we'll look at some of the characters. Now, you know characters are the way a story is told, going from point A to point B. We'll have a look at the setting as well, so where the story is told and when it's told, and then some of the main themes, such as what the story is all about.
Yes, and of course, according to the book, we are going to give you an interesting homework.
Yes, and I'm looking forward to the answers for the homework.
Yes, definitely. So what is the first word, Mr. Daryl?
Okay, so we're moving to the vocabulary section, and the first word, Ms. Maga, is to apprentice. To apprentice, it's a verb. This is when you bind to or place with an employer, a master craftsman, or the like, for instruction in how to do a trade.
شاگردت میبره.
Next word is benefactor. Benefactor is a noun. A person who confers a benefit, a kindly helper.
كالمكمدي. كتيليس مقابلي.
The next word is a verb, to intend. To intend. To have in mind as something to be done or brought about, a plan that you have.
განზრახვა.
Our next word is convict. It's a noun, convict. A person proved or declared guilty of an offense.
მსჯავრდებული. პატიმარი.
Our next word is to sentence, a verb, to sentence. To pronounce sentence, judgment upon, or to condemn or to punish a criminal.
მისჯა. განაჩენის გამოტანა.
Our next word is fortune. Fortune, the noun, fortune. Great wealth, a lot of money, and property and that kind of thing.
ქონება. სიმდიდრე.
Our next word is forgiveness. Forgiveness, a good word. Willingness to forgive, to let something go which has been bothering you.
პატიება.
And the last word, it's a person, it's a noun, a blacksmith. A blacksmith, a person who works with iron.
ჭედელი.
Well, we have a lot of legal words in this, in our book today.
Yes, of course. Now, Mr. Daryl, it is time to move on to our author.
Charles Dickens, you know, what can be said about one of the greatest English writers of all time, second maybe to Shakespeare. He was a beloved author who penned classics such as Hard Times, A Christmas Carol, which we've talked about,
Yes.
David Copperfield, Great Expectations, today's book. He was a British novelist, journalist, editor, illustrator, and social commentator.
Yeah. So he was born on February the 7th in 1812 in the southern part of England. And despite the family who was really trying to escape poverty, actually they couldn't. And nevertheless, they were happy in their early days. And in 1816, they moved to Kent. Where young Dickens and his siblings were raised, actually.
John, his father, was sent to prison for debt in 1824. Debt is when you owe someone money and you can't pay it back. When Charles was only 12 years old, following his father's imprisonment, Dickens was forced to leave school to work in a boot blacking factory, if you can imagine that, where he earned 6 shillings a week.
Yeah, not too much. Yeah. So, looking back on the experience, Dickens actually had to say goodbye to his youth and to the innocence, and he was a bit, how to say, sad to do so, but luckily he was sent back to school and he received a family inheritance and used it to pay off his debts. So, but still, he kind of missed his childhood. And he regretted that.
You can see a lot of that in the characters as well.
Yes.
Oliver Twist and so on. People who had a tough childhood.
So I guess we would say that when a writer has his own experience, maybe only then he creates masterpieces.
That's a good question to ask.
Yes.
Maybe should be the homework.
Yeah.
Within a year of being hired, Dickens began freelance reporting. In the same year, he started publishing a bunch of works such as Pickwick Club and others. He later edited magazines including Household Words and All the Year Round, the latter of which he was the founder of.
And Dickens soon married Catherine, and they had 10 children together, and soon his Sketches by Box was published.
Now, Great Expectations, our book of today, was published in serial form. That means in parts in a magazine generally. So you get part 1, part 2 the next month, part 3 the next month, and so on. Between December of 1860 and August of 1861. And in novel form, so as a book in October of 1861, because it had proved that it was popular. And it's widely considered to be his greatest literary achievement.
So after suffering a stroke, Charles died on June 9th in 1870 at his home in Kent. So he was 58 years old when he died.
The passing of a great legend.
Yes.
We have a question for the audience now. Do you think that experience in journalism helps writers write better stories?
Generally, I would say that creativity and knowledge is most important in writing, but having experience in editing magazines will definitely help a writer in the future.
Oh, thank you very much. Yeah, maybe this is kind of a thing that they know how to write it and they don't need any editors later.
You know Hemingway, you know the writer Hemingway?
Of course.
He had his practice and he had his formative skills from being a journalist for a Toronto magazine, newspaper, by the way.
Yeah? Oh, okay. And what do you think? They need editors after they publish the book?
Those kinds of journalists?
Yes.
I mean, journalists or writers?
Writers?
Probably not, but it depends on the writer, I suppose.
Okay. So now it is time to move on to the summary part. The Great Expectations is about Pip's journey, how he became like a very honored man after being poor. And the book also shows that how money and social class and power can change one's personality.
Fascinating. So, starting with the details of the novel, the young Pip meets and assists the escaped convict, criminal, Magwitch, on the marshes near his home, where he lives with his sister and Joe Gargery, the village blacksmith.
Yeah, and Pip goes to Satin House, where he actually meets an eccentric Miss Havisham and her adopted daughter Estrella, and he has to go back to this place on several occasions later in the book.
After working as an apprentice to the blacksmith for a number of years, Pip grows up one day and is informed one day that he has come into a great deal of money. Imagine that.
Yeah.
He assumes that this has come from Miss Havisham.
Wow. So Pip travels to London, where he becomes a gentleman, and he grows increasingly fond of Estrella, so he falls in love into Estrella, but neglects to maintain contact with with her family.
Imagine coming into all that money. What would you do if you won a huge amount of money like tomorrow?
Oh, I would have a great list, Mr. Darrell, but the very first thing, of course, I would think about helping the others.
Well, Magwitch, the criminal, illegally returns from abroad and announces that he was actually Pip's secret benefactor, the one who gave him the money.
Soon, lots of different stories happen in the book. One is Estrella plans to marry Bentley, and Miss Havisham is caught in a huge fire.
Yep, and after Pip unsuccessfully tries to get Magwitch out of the country once more, Magwitch dies in prison, and Pip loses his fortune.
Yeah, and Pip, now already grown up and wise, goes back to his house and meets Estrella one more time.
Imagine that, you come into a lot of money and then you lose all that money. How would you feel?
If I know how to spend money, then I would never regret.
Fair enough. Well, let's look at someone else who couldn't hang on to his money, Pip,
Yeah.
the first character of the novel. He is the novel's hero. He's an orphan who lives with his harsh and selfish sister, Mrs. Joe, and serves as the apprentice of her gentle blacksmith husband, Joe. Pip is sensitive and intellectually curious, which are good characteristics to have, but he's also extremely ambitious, and when he unexpectedly comes into money as a teenager, Pip grows extravagant in pursuit of this high lifestyle.
Yeah, and confusing personal integrity with public reputation, Pip is cruelly disloyal to Biddy and Joe, and avoiding them because of their lower class, maybe. But by the end of the novel, we can see that Pip learns how to judge people according to their inner world rather than social class. So he changes his attitude.
And it's probably masterfully done by Dickens.
Yes.
Now, the next character is Estrella Havisham, the adopted daughter of Miss Havisham. Estrella is proud, refined, beautiful, and cold, raised by Miss Havisham to wreak revenge on men. Though her beauty and elegance attract countless suitors, including Pip, Miss Havisham has raised her to lack a good heart, and she's unable to love.
Oh, okay. So maybe you can find the reason of this in the character description of Miss Havisham, because she was a wealthy daughter of a brewer, and Miss Havisham was abandoned on her very wedding day. And after that, she kind of closed the world, and she never opened her heart, maybe. And it was over 20. It continued for over 20 years. And to exact her revenge on men, Miss Havisham adopts a daughter, Miss Estrella, as you mentioned. And she's a very beautiful and desirable woman, but completely heartless. Maybe because of the reason that she was brought up by Miss Havisham, a woman who was abandoned.
Beauty and heartlessness.
Exactly.
Terrible combination.
Terrible and very, very dangerous.
Let's go over to the criminal, Abel Magwitch. He's the escaped convict that Pip helps in the novel's beginning scenes, and this is why he leaves him a large sum of money. Now, this guy was born an orphan on the streets and cruelly swindled by various people. His criminal record is largely the result of unfortunate circumstance, not character. So he is essentially, though, good-hearted and immensely generous.
Okay. Our next character is Joe Gargery. So this is Mrs. Joe's husband. Joe is a father figure for Pip throughout the novel, and Pip's childhood and his tender kindness protects Pip from Mrs. Joe's harsh parenting. And he is the village blacksmith and has no formal education at all, and a deep sense of integrity and an unfolding moral compass. Joe is loyal, generous, and kind.
So the guy who's not very educated is the nicest one.
We can say that, but maybe it's because of his feelings towards Pip. Who knows? Okay, so now I think it is time to ask a question to our audience. So it is widely said that it is far better to have loved and lost than never to have loved at all. Would Pip agree with that? What do you think?
I think Pip wouldn't agree with this because he was quite ambitious and he would not give up on his desires.
Oh, I think I agree with her. So I think that Pip would never say no to his desires.
Okay, let's move over to the setting now. We're going to set up the when and the where of the book for you. Now, Great Expectations was written by Charles Dickens in 1860 and 1861. The mid-19th century was a time of great social change in Britain. There was increasing movement from the countryside to the big city, as quite often happens everywhere. Education was slowly improving and the legal system was being changed as well. And the novel reflects these changes.
Yes, and I would just add a comment, just as we mentioned in Anne Bronte, who really described everything like in a real way, as it were. The same could be said about Charles Dickens. He also tried to show the real city, the real face of the city.
He was a master realist in a sense.
Exactly. Great Expectations is set in 19th century England, mainly in London and the surrounding marshlands where Pip grows up. The settings are described from Pip's point of view and highlights both his dissatisfaction and his idealism.
I think it's time we have a question for the audience now.
Yes.
And it is this. So Pip rises from humble roots into being a gentleman. How possible do you think it was for that time?
Yes, because this novel shows the time of industrial revolution, which made it possible for people to get rich without being born that way.
So it was a dynamic time, and because of the dynamism of the time, a lot of people could jump into the next level of society.
Yeah, exactly. That was the beginning of this type of social class. Okay, so now let's move on to the main themes of the book. And the very first main theme that we have chosen for you is ambitions and self-improvement. So the moral theme of the Great Expectations is quite simple. Affection, loyalty, and conscience are more important than social advancement, according to this book, wealth and class. So Dickens establishes the theme and shows Pip learning this lesson. Ideas and quickly become both the thematic center of the novel and the psychological mechanism that encourages much of Pip's development. So we can see that Pip, by the end of the novel, learns a lesson to understand what is the main moral idea of life, maybe.
At his heart, he's an idealist. Whenever he can conceive of something that's better than what he has, immediately he needs to get it. So he's one of those guys. For example, he longs to be a wealthy gentleman after seeing people around him who are gentlemen. And
we can see that he is quite ambitious. When he thinks of his moral shortcomings, she longs to be good. For example, when he realizes that he cannot read, he longs to learn how to do it. So Pip's desire for self-improvement is the main source of the novel's title, Great Expectations, because he believes in the possibility of making his dreams come true. So he expects, he acts, and he gets something like this.
And you spoke about self-improvement. There are three types. There's moral, social, and educational. And all three are motivations for his best and worst behavior throughout the novel.
Yeah, so now we have a question to our audience. So we can see that Pip is quite ambitious, right? And the word ambitious has both negative and positive meaning. Why?
Generally, having ambitions is good, but first of all, you should have achievable ambitions, and also you should never forget that there are other things happening in your life beside your ambitions.
It's a thoughtful, balanced answer.
Exactly, and we should look at our priorities, right, in life.
It's a skill that we have to learn.
Yes.
Some of us. We have one more theme, by the way. Crime, guilt, and innocence. The theme of crime, guilt, and innocence is explored throughout the novel, largely through the characters of the convicts and the criminal lawyer, Jaggers.
Yeah, so in general, just as social class becomes a superficial standard of value, that people must learn to look beyond findings, a better way to live his life. The external trappings of the criminal justice system, like police, court, jails, and etc., become a superficial standard of morality that people must learn to look beyond the trust his inner conscious.
If you look at the beginning, for example, Magwitch frightens Pip simply because he is a convict, and Pip feels guilty for helping him because he's afraid of the police. So he hasn't gone beyond those kinds of simple social limits.
Yeah, but by the end of the novel, we can see that Pip, however, has discovered Magwitch's inner world, inner nobility, and he is able to disregard his external status as a criminal. So he kind of changed his attitude towards the criminal, and he found out more in his inner world.
Now, here's a question to the audience to participate in that same discussion. In your opinion, which character is affected most by crime, guilt, and innocence?
Throughout Great Expectations, crime, guilt, and innocence impact the actions and feelings of every character and truly influence the outcome of the work.
So every character was participating in this theme.
Yes, exactly. Okay, so now I think it is time to wrap up everything. So we started with the author, Charles Dickens.
From there, we had a look at the summary. We looked at the orphan Pip and his troubles with Estella and Magwitch and so on.
We had lots of characters, but the main protagonist of the novel will be Pip himself, of course, becoming a better person or learning some lessons.
And we looked at the setting. As you remember, it's the mid-19th century, 1860, probably a little bit before that as well, and London.
Yeah, and the main themes that we have chosen were this ambitions and self-improvement, and crime, guilt, and innocence.
Well, how ambitious are you, Ms. Maka?
I think I am. I am considered to be ambitious, but as our audience member said, I know how to balance it.
And how criminal are you?
Not at all.
Good answer.
Okay.
We have a vocabulary list that I'll go over once more. Here are the words, just for pronunciation purposes. Forgiveness, to apprentice, blacksmith, convict, to intend, fortune, benefactor, and to sentence.
Thank you very much, Mr. Darrell, for nice pronunciation and reminding us of the words.
Thank you.
And of course, we will not forget about the homework. And Mr. Darrell, what is it?
Something a bit unique this time. Create a wanted poster of a convict, paying close attention to a description of him in the novel. Your poster should include a description of the convict, a summary of why he is dangerous, and detailed information about what a person would do or should do if they see him.
შექმნით პოსტერი სახელწოდებით იძებნება მსჯავრდებული. მიაქციეთ ყურადღება მსჯავრდებულის აღწერილობას. პოსტერი უნდა მოიცავდეს მის დეტალურ აღწერას, მსჯავრდებულის დეტალურ აღწერას, მოკლე დასკვნას თუ რატომ იძებნება ის, დეტალურ ინფორმაციას თუ რა უნდა მოიმოქმედოს პიროვნებამ, რომელიც მას ნახავს შემთხვევით.
And you can send that homework to the address you see on the screen right now.
დავალებები გამოაგზავნეთ ეკრანზე მითითებულ მისამართზე. Wow, so after all those criminal cases and different characteristics, I think we've finished and discussed the book.
Yeah, it's always good to talk about these classics, especially something by Charles Dickens.
Yeah, I love him. So we have to say goodbye to our TV audience as well.
Thank you very much for watching. Goodbye.
Goodbye.